for a storm. Beneath the vast moonlit sky, an army 185,000 strong lay in their tents, their banners swaying gently in the breeze, their swords gleaming under the pale glow. The Assyrians had come as an unstoppable force, their might stretching across the land like a shadow of conquest. Their war drums had silenced kingdoms, their swords had shattered empires. Now they stood before Jerusalem, laughing at its feeble defenses, confident that by dawn the city would be theirs. But the night held secrets they could not see. Beyond human eyes, beyond the reach of mortal power, something stirred. A presence, unseen yet overwhelming, descended upon the earth like a whisper of judgment. No clashing of steel, no war cries, no desperate struggle, just the stillness of the divine at work. And yet, when the first light of morning crept across the horizon, the battlefield had changed. 185,000 warriors lay lifeless, their strength stolen in a single, unknowable moment. What force could erase an empire's might in mere moments? What unseen hand moved against the invincible? This is the story of the angel who turned the tide of history with a single act, one that proved that no army, no king, no empire stands against the will of the Almighty. There was a time when the very mention of Assyria struck terror into the hearts of kings and commoners alike. It was an empire like no other, a machine of conquest that devoured nations and left only ruins in its wake. Its chariots thundered across the earth, its warriors marched like an unyielding tide, and its kings believed themselves to be the hand of destiny, carving their names into history with the blood of the fallen. At the height of this relentless dominion stood Sennacherib, the great and terrible king, a man whose ambition knew no restraint, whose hunger for conquest was never sated. He was not merely a ruler, he was a force, a storm given human form, a sovereign who looked upon the lands of the earth and saw only prizes to be taken. The world was his chessboard, and the cities of men were pieces to be swept aside. His father, Sargon II, had built a mighty kingdom, but Sennacherib was determined to surpass him, to cement his name in eternity. Under his command, the Assyrian war machine reached new heights of destruction. Its armies were like the breath of death itself, descending upon nations with precision and ruthlessness. Warriors clad in iron, their blades honed to a wicked edge, moved as one, disciplined and merciless. Their siege engines were monstrous, wooden behemoths that battered walls and turned fortresses into dust. Their archers blackened the skies with arrows, each shaft finding its mark with lethal certainty. Their cavalry, swift and merciless, tore through enemy lines like a lion among sheep. The lands that defied Assyria were not merely defeated, they were erased. Cities were reduced to smoldering ruins, their inhabitants slaughtered or shackled in chains. Those who opposed Sennacherib did not simply lose, they ceased to exist. The empire's wrath was not content with mere conquest, it demanded annihilation. Statues of foreign gods were shattered, temples razed, and the very identity of conquered peoples ground into oblivion. The world trembled at the sound of Assyrian war drums, for they signaled the end of all things familiar. With each campaign, Sennacherib's reputation swelled like a rising tempest. His armies crushed the Elamites, subdued the Chaldeans, and turned the once proud cities of Mesopotamia into silent tombs of stone and ash. Babylon itself, the jewel of the ancient world, dared to defy him, and for that it suffered a fate more terrible than death. Sennacherib did not merely capture Babylon, he obliterated it. Its walls were torn down, its temples destroyed, its streets flooded and left in ruin. It was not conquest, it was vengeance, a warning to all who would stand against him. Yet even as he basked in his triumphs, Sennacherib's eyes turned southward toward a land still unconquered. A small kingdom, insignificant in size, yet bold enough to resist him. Judah, a land whose people claimed a god greater than Assyria, a city whose walls still stood despite the empire's relentless advance. Jerusalem, To the mighty Assyrian king, it was nothing more than another obstacle, another nation that would soon bow or be broken. He had faced gods before, and none had saved their people. The idols of Babylon, the deities of the Arameans, the gods of Elam, all had fallen silent when faced with Assyrian might. What difference would the God of Judah make? What power could a single city possess against the might of an empire that had swallowed the world? The people of Judah heard of his coming long before his armies reached their borders. Messengers arrived breathless, their faces pale with dread, whispering of the ruin that followed in his wake. Tales of cities burned to the ground, of entire populations slaughtered or enslaved. Of Babylon, once glorious, now a graveyard of broken stones and forgotten prayers. The streets of Jerusalem, so often filled with the sound of life, grew quiet with fear. Mothers clutched their children, whispering prayers into the night. Warriors sharpened their swords, though they knew they were no match for the endless hordes that marched beneath the Assyrian banner. The scribes recorded the events with trembling hands, knowing that should Sennacherib reach their gates, their words would be the last testament of a people erased from history. And yet, within the walls of Jerusalem, there was something the Assyrians had never encountered before. A defiance not born of numbers or military strength, but of faith, a belief that even in the face of absolute destruction, there was something greater than the might of men. Sennacherib did not see this. He saw only another victory waiting to be claimed, another king to be humiliated, another god to be cast down. His messengers rode ahead, standing before the walls of Jerusalem, and in voices filled with arrogance and scorn, they demanded surrender. They listed the nations that had fallen before Assyria, naming their gods as corpses in the dust. "Where are they now?" they mocked. "Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? Did they save their people from the hand of the great king of Assyria?" The words echoed through the city, sinking deep into the hearts of those who heard them. For how could they deny the truth? Assyria had crushed all who stood against it. No army had withstood its power. No nation had escaped its wrath. And now its fury had come for them. Far beyond the walls of Jerusalem, beneath the endless sky, Sennacherib's forces gathered like a storm on the horizon. Their banners caught the wind, a sea of black and crimson stretching as far as the eye could see. The air trembled with the sound of marching feet, the metallic clang of armor, the neighing of war horses eager for battle. This was the might of Assyria, the greatest army the world had ever known, poised to erase Jerusalem from existence. Sennacherib rode at the head of his legions, his gaze fixed upon the city that dared defy him. To him, it was already conquered. The only question that remained was whether its people would submit or suffer. Either way, history would remember the fate of Judah just as it had remembered Babylon. But history had not yet been written. There was still one more chapter to unfold, a story not of earthly power, but of something far greater. For though the armies of men stood ready to bring destruction, they had not accounted for the unseen forces that moved beyond their understanding. Forces that did not march in legions, nor wield swords of iron. For when the might of the world stands against the will of heaven, the outcome is never as certain as men believe. And though Sennacherib did not yet know it, the battle for Jerusalem would not be fought by human hands. The Assyrian Empire, relentless and unyielding, had swept across the ancient world like an unstoppable storm, leaving ruin in its wake. Their warriors, known for their brutal tactics and unshakable resolve, were feared by all who dared stand against them. Now they had come to the gates of Jerusalem, the last stronghold of Judah, and the city trembled in the shadow of their might. King Hezekiah, once a leader full of hope and resolve, now found himself locked in a desperate battle with his own fears. The once bustling streets of Jerusalem, filled with traders and families, now stood silent,